The most extensive international prisoner exchange since the Cold War took place on Thursday, resulting in the release of several journalists, a former US Marine, and political activists by Russia. This complex deal involved exchanging a convicted Russian assassin imprisoned in Germany, along with several Russian intelligence operatives and hackers held in United States and Europe. So here is a look at the individuals who were released. Ivan Gershkovich. In March 2023, Russian prosecutors detained journalist Ivan Gershkovich in Yekaterinburg, Russia. They charged him with espionage, accusing him of obtaining secret information about Russian military facility. Despite denying the charges, he was quickly sentenced to 16 years in a high-security penal colony after a brief 3-day trial. The second person is Alsu Kurmasheva. Alsu Kurmasheva, a Russian-American editor of Free Radio Europe or Radio Liberty, was sentenced to 6.5 years in Russian penal colony for disseminating false information about the Russian army. She was arrested while visiting her hometown, Kazan, and faced charges related to a book she edited that featured Russians opposing the war in Ukraine. The third one, another interesting character, is Paul Whelan. Paul Whelan, a former US Marine, was arrested in Moscow in 2018 after accepting a flash drive from a Russian friend, leading to allegation of holding classified information. He was sentenced to 16 years in a high-security penal colony, facing harsh conditions, and he felt abandoned by his home countries. He has multiple citizenships. Another one is Ilya Yashin. Ilya Yashin, a prominent Russian opposition figure and close associate of Alexei Navalny and Boris Nemtsov, has been sentenced to 8.5 years in prison for spreading false information about atrocities committed by Russian troops in Ukraine. Following the death of Alexei Navalny, Yashin, 41, is regarded as one of the most well-known opposition leaders of Russia. Before his arrest, he discussed the war in Ukraine on his YouTube channel, frequently criticizing President Vladimir Putin and his special military operation. Oleg Orlov, a 71-year-old veteran activist and human rights defender, was a leading member of Memorial, one of Russia's oldest human rights organizations. The organization focused on researching mass purges under Stalin. In 2021, Russian court ordered Memorial's dissolution, citing its failure to fulfill its duties as a foreign agent. The organization was later awarded the Nobel Peace Prize. In February, a Moscow court sentenced Orlov to 2.5 years in prison for opposing the war in Ukraine. Another one is Vladimir Kara-Murza. Russian activist Vladimir Kara-Murza, sentenced to 25 years for treason, lobbied in Washington for sanctions against Russian officials involved in human rights abuses. He survived 2 poisoning attempts and won the Pulitzer Prize in 2024 for commentary written while in prison. Lilia Chanysheva, 42, head of Alexei Navalny's regional office in Bashkortostan, was convicted on extremism charges after exposing local corruption. She was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, which was later extended by 2 more years. She pleaded for leniency at her trial, citing her desire to become a mother. Ksenia Fadeyeva, 32, a Russian dissident, joined Alexei Navalny's team to change Russia. She was with Navalny when he was poisoned in August 2020. Detained in December 2021, she was sentenced to 9 years in prison on extremism charges. Another one is Kevin Lake, a 19-year-old German-born individual, is one of the Russia's youngest prisoners accused of treason. He was found guilty of photographing military sites as a minor and sending the images to a foreign state. Lake was convicted in a closed trial and sentenced to 4 years. On Tuesday, Belarusian President Alexandra Lukashenko made a surprise decision by pardoning Rico Krieger, a German citizen, who had been sentenced to death in Belarus on terrorism charges. Krieger, who is 30-year-old, recently appeared in a heavily choreographed 17-minute interview on the state television channel after his conviction. Krieger's trial was characterized by lack of independent media coverage and public evidence. Following his formal request, Krieger was unexpectedly pardoned by President Lukashenko shortly thereafter. Dieter Voronin. Voronin, a political scientist with dual Russian-German citizenship, was detained in 2021 in connection with a treason case involving journalist Ivan Safronov. Safronov was accused of passing information about Russian military personnel in Syria to Voronin in 2015 in exchange for $248. Voronin allegedly passed this information to employees of a university in Zurich and German Foreign Intelligence Service, the BND. Voronin initially admitted to wrongdoing but later recanted his statements. He was sentenced to over 13 years in prison, while Safarov received a 22-year sentence in 2022. Patrick Schobel, a German national, was arrested in Pulkovo International Airport in St. Petersburg for carrying 6 cannabis-infused gummy bears. This has raised concern about increased arrests of foreigners for potential prisoner exchange. Schobel's arrest occurred shortly after Russian President Putin expressed interest in exchanging a convicted Russian assassin being held in Germany. German Moyzhes, a 39-year-old Russian-German lawyer, was detained in St. Petersburg and charged with treason. Moyzhes was the managing partner of a consultancy that helped Russians obtain European residency permits. Moyzhes grew up in Germany before returning to Russia 6 years ago. Vadim Ostanin, an associate of Navalny, was convicted of extremism charges last year and sentenced to 9 years in penal colony. He was detained in 2021 after Navalny's organization was labeled an extremist by Russia's government. Andrei Pivovarov. The 42-year-old Andrei Pivovarov, a prominent opposition figure from St. Petersburg, intended to run the September 2020 Russian parliamentary election. However, while on a plane to Warsaw in May 2022, he was detained by masked Federal Security Services agents. Despite being incarcerated, Pivovarov ran for the office from inside a courtroom, becoming the first political prisoner to do so in Russian history. Alexandra Skochilenko. In November 2023, Alexandra Skochilenko, a Russian artist and musician, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for an anti-war protest in St. Petersburg. She covered supermarket price tags with stickers providing information about Russia's war against Ukraine. Skochilenko, known for her pacifism, made a statement in court wearing one of her trademark bright shirts with a red heart on the front. These were the prisoners who will be getting back to West. Now here are the prisoners who are going back to Russia. In 2019, Vadim Krasikov, a 58-year-old convicted Russian assassin serving a life sentence in Germany, was found guilty of the murder of a former Chechen fighter, Zelmikhan Shangshkovil, in a Berlin park. He was accused of employing a similar tactic in 2013 murder in a Moscow suburb, although the charges were withdrawn. In 2021, Korsikov was convicted of murder and received a life sentence in Germany. German prosecutors labeled the killing as a political assassination ordered by the Kremlin. Vladislav Klyushin, a Russian businessman with ties to the Kremlin, was sentenced to 9 years in US prison for his involvement in a $93 million insider trading scheme that included hacking corporate computer networks. In Russia, Klyushin ran an IT company called M13, which worked with the government. According to the Justice Department, he was arrested in Switzerland in 2021 and believed to have made at least $34 million from the scheme. Roman Seleznev. In 2016, a Russian legislator's son, Roman Seleznev, was convicted in US federal court for a cyber attack on American businesses that led to a $169 million loss. In 2017, he received 27-year sentence, the longest ever for hacking in the United States. Vadim Konoshchenok, a Russian citizen allegedly connected to Russia's Federal Security Service, was extradited to the US on 13 July 2023. US officials claim he smuggled American electronics and ammunition to support Moscow's effort in Ukraine, violating US sanctions using front companies. He is believed to have been part of a transnational criminal scheme coordinated by Russian intelligence services. Artyom Dultsev and Anna Dultseva, a Russian couple, were sentenced to 19 months in Slovenian capital for espionage. They posed as Argentine expats in Slovenia while working as deep cover agents for Russia's foreign intelligence services. They were arrested in December 2022 and released on Wednesday for the time served. Pablo González. Pablo Rubtsov, also known as Pablo González, was arrested by Polish authorities in 2022 on suspicion of conducting intelligence activities while posing as a journalist for Russia's military intelligence agency. When he was detained, he was covering the war in Ukraine for Spanish media. Mikhail Mikushin. In October 2022, Norwegian domestic security authorities arrested a man who had entered the country claiming to be a Brazilian academic working on Arctic security issues. He was suspected of being a Russian spy. In Norway, he went by the name of Jose Assis Gemaria. He worked at a local university in the Arctic city of Tromsø. However, Norwegian investigators later identified him as Mikhail Vladimir Mikushin of Russia. So these were the names of the prisoners who were swapped between Russia, US and the Western countries, and one of the biggest prisoner exchange since the Cold War.